Hey everyone! Welcome back to another story, one that involves a neighbor named Karen and a situation that took me by surprise. I live in a rural area with a few acres of land that I use for farming. My house is fairly close to a major road, which means I'm near a few neighbors, though there's mostly just open fields between us. On my property, I've got a small barn to the right where I keep all my farm equipment, animal feed, and gasoline, keeps everything organized in one place. I stick to a pretty strict routine every day. I get up early, make sure the animals are fed, collect the eggs, and check on the equipment. It helps me stay on top of things and makes life easier, especially as I get older. Winter is a bit simpler since there's less going on with the harvest and machinery, but I still enjoy the rhythm of it all. Now, onto the main part of this story. Because I manage a decent amount of farmland, I like to keep an eye on things. My kids helped me set up security cameras around the property so I can monitor any wildlife or unexpected visitors. I don't check the footage regularly unless something seems off, like broken fences, missing tools, or strange tire tracks. One morning, I went out to the barn to prep for tilling the soil before planting season. I reached for 2 gas canisters that were usually near the hoe, but they weren't where I'd left them. At first, I thought maybe I moved them without realizing it while grabbing something else. But when I counted all the gas cans, I realized 2 were definitely missing. After feeding the animals, I went inside to check the security cameras. I hadn't noticed any signs of forced entry on the barn lock, but I wanted to be sure. When I looked at the footage from the night before, I saw a car pull up next to my barn, something immediately familiar about it. A couple hundred feet to the left of my property lives an older woman I'll call Karen for the story. Karen had moved in about 4 months ago, and honestly, I ended up knowing more about her than any of the previous neighbors. I saw her almost weekly, either walking up the road or pulling into my driveway to complain about something. At first, I thought she was just trying to be neighborly, but it quickly became clear she was one of those people who always had something to gripe about. Most of her complaints were about things I owned or did. First, it was the rooster crowing too early in the morning. Then she said she could smell manure from her porch, especially on hot days. I have 2 pigs, but their area isn't anywhere near where the smell would carry to her house. Still, I learned to just nod along whenever she came stomping up the driveway, agreeing just to get her to leave faster. Another thing about Karen? She was obsessed with her car. Not saying people shouldn't invest in nice things, but she talked about hers constantly. She'd complain if my driveway was wet because she didn't want mud on her car, yet somehow kept driving up here to complain about other nonsense. To me, that never added up. She cared more about her car than being a decent neighbor. So seeing her car on the camera footage pulling up to my barn confused me at first. She hated getting her car dirty, so why would she park next to a dusty old barn? Then I watched as she picked the lock on my barn door, slipped inside, grabbed 2 gas canisters, and took them to her car. She unscrewed her gas cap, poured both canisters into her tank, tossed the empty cans into her trunk, relocked the barn, and drove off like nothing happened. I couldn't even explain how I felt in that moment. At first disbelief, then it turned into real anger. She thought she could just walk onto my property, steal my gas, fill up her fancy car, and cover her tracks with a lockpick? Who did she think she was? I decided she'd probably try it again, so I needed to be ready. I filled up my equipment with 2 fresh containers of gas, then stopped by the local gas station to partially fill a few more. The rest, I filled with sugar. I knew exactly how much to add. It wasn't the first time someone tried stealing from me, but I hoped it would be the last. I left those sugared-up containers in plain sight, hoping she'd come back for more. And sure enough, less than a week later, I opened the barn and found the missing gas cans returned, but something told me Karen wouldn't be smiling for long. So, the gas canisters with the sugar in them were gone, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. For those of you who don't know, mixing sugar with gasoline is a pretty well-known trick around farming communities. When that sugar hits the heat of the engine, it turns into the sticky, gooey mess that basically destroys your fuel system within days. It's not just a minor inconvenience, it's a costly repair. And around here, farmers have used this method for years to identify thieves without even having to say a word. I figured it was only a matter of time before Karen came knocking. But this time, I had the upper hand. I had video proof. I knew it was just a matter of time before she confronted me, and sure enough, 3 days later, there she was, pounding on my door. She looked furious, face red, eyes locked on mine like I'd personally wronged her for life. She had walked up from her house, and I could see her car sitting in my driveway, hood popped open by someone from the local mechanic shop. "Your gasoline ruined my car," she snapped. I played dumb. "Excuse me." "You heard me. There was sugar mixed in the gas, and it destroyed my fuel system." I calmly asked her why she thought that had anything to do with me. I suggested maybe she should take it up with the gas station she bought from. That's when she realized how much she'd just incriminated herself. Her tone shifted slightly. "Can you come inside for a second? I need to show you something." That was the first time I ever invited her into my home, and I pulled up the footage from the cameras. I showed her exactly what happened, how she picked the lock on my barn, took the containers, filled her tank, then returned them days later. "I know it looked easy for you to get in," I said, "but I want you to watch closely. Here's me bringing those same containers into the barn myself, no sugar added. And look, once they're inside, nothing comes in or out until you show up again." She tried to argue that someone must have snuck in through a back door of the barn, but I told her I'd been meaning to fix the back door for a while now, which wasn't true. The truth was, there wasn't a back door. The only way in or out was through the front, which was always locked. "I'm really sorry about your car," I said, keeping a straight face. "I'll make sure that back door gets fixed soon so nobody else tampers with the gas again." Her face turned redder than a ripe tomato, and she stormed out faster than she came in. Let's just say I stretched the truth a little bit to see if she'd buy it. And she did hook, line, and sinker. If she tried to sue me or ask for money, I had the footage to prove that I didn't add the sugar, and that anyone could have tampered with the cans while they were in her possession. Even if I told the authorities the same story, they'd believe me because, let's be honest, gasoline theft is a real issue on farms, and no one has a right to expect clean gas from someone else's property. Honestly, I still don't understand why people get so worked up about the sugar thing. If you leave gas containers on your land, you can put whatever you want in them. No one's entitled to steal clean fuel from you. Either way, Karen couldn't drive her car for nearly 2 weeks after that. The mechanic told me she had to replace the entire fuel system, cost her a pretty penny. The next day, I checked the barn and saw that the sugared canisters had been returned. After that, Karen never came back, whether to steal more gas or just to complain about something else. I think she finally learned her lesson. And hey, if you're enjoying these kinds of stories, stick around. There's another wild one coming up next. This one's about my girlfriend who actually sold my family heirloom car over a petty argument. Yep, you heard that right. I ended up suing her. But that's a story for another video. Thanks for watching this one, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and I've got plenty more neighbor drama and life twists coming your way. So, to wrap up what happened, after everything went down, I packed my stuff, grabbed my cat, and just left. We were done. Since then, I've been getting constant calls from her, and even from her family and friends, every single day. Most of them aren't exactly kind messages either. They're calling me names, blaming me for everything, like I was the one who sold a priceless family heirloom for $400. But let's talk about the argument real quick, because people keep asking. It wasn't some random fight out of nowhere. We'd had issues before. This wasn't our first rodeo. The last big argument we had was actually just a month earlier, when she disappeared on me for 9 whole hours without a word. And that wasn't cool either. So this time? Yeah, it was about chores again. She accused me of not taking care of the cats, but honestly, it wasn't like I didn't do anything. I was working nonstop, putting food on the table, paying all the bills. I had an agreement with her that she would handle the house stuff while I worked, and I still made sure the cats got fed. I love them. I was tired, sure, but I wasn't neglecting anything. May 15th, the next day, I wanted to give everyone an update. First off, thank you so much for all the advice and support. A lot of you have been through similar things and offered great suggestions. I talked to my cousin who's a lawyer, and he said I could have a solid case if this ever went to court. Honestly, though, at this point, I just want my truck back and maybe a little compensation for the mess I had to go through. I doubt the police will do much, though. I've had bad experiences with them before. My ex showed up at my door the other day, but I ignored her. I don't want anything to do with her anymore. My dad found out what happened too, and he was super upset. That truck was basically the family's main source of income for nearly 30 years. It meant a lot more than just being a vehicle. I ended up filing a police report for the stolen F-100, hoping something can come of it. In the meantime, I'm doing my own digging, checked out a couple junkyards nearby, but I wasn't optimistic I'd find it on my own. Still, I hope someone might help us track down that old green F-100 we all loved so much. And guess what? Update number 3, someone finally found the truck. A friend tracked it down at a nearby junkyard, which was a huge relief. Thank you again to everyone who reached out and gave advice. I really appreciate it. Update number 4, since a lot of people asked questions, I figured I should clarify a few things. First, no, I wasn't ignoring the cats completely. I did take care of them. She doesn't work, and I was the one bringing in the money. Our deal was that I handled the finances, and she took care of the house. That's how we made things work. Which is why this whole thing felt so petty. Also, for context, the night this all happened, I was at a bar catching up with a friend I hadn't seen in 5 years. I don't drink heavily or often, I just wanted to hang out for a bit. But while I was gone, she decided to take the truck and sell it. Even worse, the signature on the paperwork was forged by her. From what I've found out, the junkyard guy knew it was worth way more. He told me it was a $9,600 profit for him. They opened early today, but since it's only 5 a.m. here, I still had to wait a while before I could get over there. As you can imagine, it was a pretty wild day. I hadn't gotten a single minute of sleep. Then came update number 5. I got the truck back. After a full day of no sleep, panic, work, and stress, it was finally over. The good news? My girlfriend has been charged with a Class 1 felony for stealing a car worth more than $10,000. She also got hit with a $5,000 fine. I picked up the truck from the garage exhausted, so tired I could barely stand. I told myself I'd give you guys a better update tomorrow, once I've gotten some rest. Now, final update. I have the F-100 back. It's actually sitting in my driveway again. But yeah, I did have to pay back the $400 she sold it for. And it's definitely not in the same condition as before. It's covered in dirt, probably from being driven to the junkyard, which, let's be honest, isn't the cleanest place on earth. The bodywork, which used to be pristine, is now damaged. There's a huge scratch in the paint, probably from a sharp key or something like that. The damage is bad enough that rust has already started to show through the paint, which is not good at all. The truck, unfortunately, isn't quite the same as it was before. I can tell she did some damage, probably broke the brake fluid line too, because the brakes aren't working like they should. But on the bright side, my ex has been charged with a Class 1 felony for grand theft auto and also got hit with a $5,000 fine. So justice is moving forward, even if the repairs are going to take some time. Now, on to another great story from the r/ARP Stories subreddit, where you can actually post your own stories, by the way, and there's a chance I might read them in one of these videos. This one is titled Paying My Property Taxes and was posted by user Sufficient Spring 57. Let me break it down for you. So the person writing this had a rough go of things in 2023 and early 2024, both financially and health-wise. They changed jobs, had a minor heart attack, and smashed their right shoulder so badly that they needed replacement surgery. That made it really tough for them to work consistently, which led to falling behind on their 2023 property taxes. Once they finally had enough money to pay what they owed, including all the ridiculous penalties added on, they brought the cash into the county treasurer's office. But here's where it gets frustrating. The clerk applied the payment toward the upcoming 2024 taxes instead of the overdue 2023 ones. That wasn't just a mistake, it was a big problem. By September, they received a notice saying they were being assessed another $1,200 in penalties, and if they didn't pay everything by December 1st, foreclosure proceedings would start. The kicker? The treasurer's office has a policy of not accepting partial payments. You have to pay everything at once. And to make matters worse, the actual tax bills don't get sent out until just a few days before they're due. So unless someone pays up front and in full within about 4 days of receiving the notice, the fines pile on fast. No monthly or quarterly installments allowed, just a short window to come up with thousands of dollars. In a poor, rural county, that kind of system basically guarantees people will fall behind. Eventually, they got another letter stating they hadn't paid by December 1st, which wasn't true and now faced even more penalties. Foreclosure was back on the table if they didn't pay by year's end. The letter itself was postmarked November 26th and arrived on Friday the 29th, the very day they were planning to go pay. By then, they were already stuck with fees that shouldn't have been assessed. That's when they came up with a plan. Instead of paying right away, they left the money in their credit union savings account for a little longer and talked to the manager about a favor. Then, on December 30th, just 4 hours before the treasurer's office closed for the year, they called to confirm the total amount owed, $4,200, up from the original $1,800. They stopped by the credit union, made a withdrawal, and headed over to settle the bill. What happened next was something straight out of a prank video. They handed the clerk $4,000 in dollar coins, neatly wrapped in bank-sealed boxes of 40 rolls each. Along with that, they gave her $174 in $2 bills and $26 in singles. Instead of just accepting the sealed boxes or counting the rolls inside, the clerk had to open every single box, pull out each roll, stack them on the counter, and count them one by one. Then, when she tried to run the $2 bills through the currency counter, it jammed, since it wasn't programmed to accept them. She had to count those manually too. In the end, she gave them a receipt for $4,227.30 in cash credited to their account and shouted, "Merry Christmas," at them on the way out. The best part? She was so angry, she didn't even give back the 27 cents in change. That meant her till was short at the end of the night, which would likely trigger an audit. Either they'll have to admit their no partial payments policy is completely unreasonable, apply the overpayment to next year's taxes, and acknowledge that partial payments can be accepted after all. Or they'll spend 60 cents mailing a check for 27 cents. Is the person who did this an asshole? Maybe, technically. But honestly, so are they. And no, you're not the bad guy here, you're just clever. From what they say, they come from a family famous for petty revenge and even nuclear-level comebacks. One grandfather bought an office building just so he could evict the local KKK chapter back in the 1940s. So yeah, somewhere, their mom and granddad are probably smiling proudly. It might be petty, but it's definitely amazing. So, the story starts with me working at a large grocery store, managing the deli department. The layout of our area is pretty specific. From the entrance, there's about 20 feet of sandwich bar, followed by a small check stand counter. This part ends up being important later, and then we have our sushi station. After that, there's about 40 feet of fresh-made salads and sliced meat counters. The whole department stretches out to about 300 feet along the west wall. Now, here's something important to understand. While we work in the same space, the Chinese hot food section and the fried food area are not actually part of our department. They're a franchisee, meaning they don't even work for the same company as I do. We never serve their food, and they don't serve ours. And just so you know, the franchisees happen to be a Burmese immigrant family, which becomes relevant to what happened next. This all took place during the great toilet paper shortage of 2020, a time when everyone was stressed out and on edge. Most of our customers were great, but it was definitely a high-pressure environment. On this particular day, my head boss had left, and I was in charge. My usual strategy when I'm in charge is to try and hide in the back and do cooking or prep work, only coming out front when extra hands are needed. Anyway, I was back there frying something when I heard a commotion up front. I hate dealing with customer service situations, but I'm actually really good at it, so I figured I should go see what was going on. When I got to the front, there was an angry old lady absolutely losing her mind at the Chinese hot case. I stepped in to see what the problem was. "Hello, ma'am, how can I help you?" I asked. She snapped back, "I want a 2-item combo, half rice, half chow mein pepper beef, and orange chicken." And yes, I remember her exact order. I gestured toward Steve, the chef who worked in the Chinese department. "All right, he'll be able to help you with that." "No, not him. You get me my food." "I'm sorry, ma'am," I said calmly, "we're in different departments. But Steve will be more than happy to help." I tried to keep explaining, but she kept cutting me off. "I don't want that. Insert Asian slur, touching my food. Get it for me now." We went back and forth a few times like this. I tried to de-escalate and bring her down a bit, but every time, she demanded that I get her food instead of Steve. Finally, I did what I always do in these situations. I called over a manager using the intercom. She kept screaming racial slurs the entire time. When the manager arrived, I tried to explain the situation while she continued shouting obscenities and slurs nonstop. He tried 3 or 4 times to talk her down, but she just kept insisting she wanted a white person to serve her instead of that guy. To his credit, my manager, a big, imposing Samoan guy, tried to reason with her, but after a while, he finally shut her down. "Ma'am, you're not allowed to shop here right now. Please leave the premises." Of course, she didn't stop yelling even as she stormed out. She promised she was going to sue us all, that we'd be fired, and that her son was going to make us pay. Seriously, she threatened violence. As she was leaving, I suddenly got struck with inspiration. You see, I always follow a strict script when handling customers. One part of that script is offering a polite farewell. So, as my very large Samoan manager gently escorted her out of the store, I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Thank you for shopping at company. Please come again." Honestly, not everyone clapped, but I got a few good laughs from the customers who had witnessed the whole ordeal. I used to do stand-up comedy, so moments like that hit differently. It felt kind of satisfying. After she left, my boss came up to me and said, when you said that, it was all I could do to not laugh." We got back to work, cleared the line, and things eventually settled down. A few customers actually complimented me on how I handled the situation, which felt nice. Even better, some of my coworkers, people I deeply care about, showed me their appreciation, which meant a lot. If that had been the end of the story, I probably would have posted it back in March 2020. But no, there was a part 2. Same day, about 6 to 7 hours later, so around 9 p.m., the store was still open, but my department had closed for the night. Part of my job was finishing up the cleanup at the end of the shift. At that moment, I was scrubbing the floors near the sandwich area, mopping water everywhere, and hitting it with a deck brush so I could squeeze it into the floor sink. I even had one earbud in, listening to a podcast episode about Genghis Khan. Yes, that detail ended up in the court record. Suddenly, I looked up and saw a very angry young man walking toward me. Now, I'm 6 feet 3 inches, but super skinny, and I've literally never been in a fight in my life. This guy had at least 2 inches on me, looked like he lived at the gym, and had several intimidating tattoos visible on both his face and arms. He growled, "Are you the guy that disrespected my mom?" At first, I had no idea what he was talking about. Then he accused me of disrespecting his mom. That's when I realized he was the angry old lady's son. It's hard to describe exactly how our conversation went from there. He leaned against the 5-foot sandwich bar counter, looking like death incarnate, ready to break through the plexiglass. I was confused at first, then terrified. This guy was built like a tank, and he was mad at me. The last thing he said before lunging was, "You're getting beat." He went over the sandwich bar check stand and vaulted over it into the back counter area. Remember how I mentioned I was cleaning the floor? Well, the tile we use in deli areas gets extremely slippery when wet. Even with special shoes, we have issues. I hadn't squeezed any of the water from the area where he landed. As I was still thinking about grabbing my deck brush to defend myself, he landed and immediately slipped. It was almost comically bad. His feet slid out from under him, and he hit the ground hard, landing flat on his head like something straight out of Looney Tunes. By then, other employees from the front check stands had noticed the commotion and rushed over. What was I doing during those few seconds? Standing there, frozen, holding my stiff-bristled brush over my shoulder like I was about to whack him with it like a blacksmith forging steel. He was motionless on the floor, lying in a pool of soapy water, and there was blood. Blood mixed with soapy water on red tile is unsettling. I still don't like thinking about it. One of my coworkers was already on the phone with the police, letting them know they'd need an ambulance too. Within minutes, emergency responders showed up, paramedics dealt with the angry son, and I spent the rest of my shift talking to the police. I didn't even have to finish the floors, and somehow I still got paid overtime for the hour. Later on, when the legal stuff started rolling in, I ended up testifying. Since this all happened at work and I'm unionized, I got 3 full days off, with pay, to attend the deposition and appear in court. The deposition lasted maybe 6 hours total, and I was only in the courtroom for about 15 minutes. A few favorite details from that part of the ordeal. First, I met with an assistant district attorney downtown, and they basically told me to say, I don't know, if asked about specific conversations, so they could legally lead me into recounting everything. Then my boss showed up and got annoyed because I kept saying I didn't remember. We didn't get along well, we used to argue a lot, but somehow his office still sent me a Christmas card. Second, turns out the angry son had multiple warrants, not just in California, but in other states too. The district attorney actually complained about how much harder this made his job. Third, when the angry old lady took the stand, she was exactly how I remembered her: curse words every other sentence, constant racial slurs, and zero respect for the legal process. Honestly, she was a classic Karen. I can't condone the racism, but there was a sort of twisted consistency to her behavior. Before wrapping up the video, I want to share one last petty revenge story. It's titled Cheat on Me? Fine. You'll never win the lottery jackpot. So, my ex once had a vivid dream where she won the lottery. She woke up, wrote down the numbers, and swore she'd play them for the rest of her life, or until she won, which she was convinced would happen someday. Well, guess what? She cheated on me recently. I broke up with her, but I still knew those lottery numbers. I'd bought her tickets enough times to memorize them. So for the past 3 weeks, I've been playing the same numbers in every draw.